In the first part that I discussed, surface mount process, we talked about applying the solder paste, which is the first step in the entire surface mount assembly process. So now, at the end of that video and what I was discussing in that first part, we now had evenly distributed solder paste on all of the electrical contact points on a particular circuit board. So at this point, once the paste has been applied, it doesn't have to be dealt with immediately. That board can sit for quite a few hours without any issues, without the paste going bad. It's not going to flow or move around if you're in a well-controlled temperature environment. And it now is just waiting to be put into what's called a pick and place machine to actually have the surface mount components deposited to the board. And as the name suggests, a pick and place machine picks the parts that are sometimes on a reel, sometimes they're in a tube, sometimes they're in a tray, whatever it may be, to pick those parts up and place them in the correct location on the circuit board. Now, as you might imagine, there are many, many components that can go into a board, and each component gets what's called a feeder, and that each part value and part type gets its own feeder, which the machine will then pick the parts from when it needs to place that particular part somewhere on the circuit board. And how it knows where and what part to put where on the board is all contained in a computer program that comes out of the actual design software that's used to create the circuit board or PCB itself. And the pick and place machine is absolutely fascinating. One of the things that still to this day fascinates me about them is that they can move so fast. It's almost blindingly quick. And basically the process itself, even though it's very complicated, the base parts of what's going on is very simple. So the parts are picked up by nozzles, and it's basically just using compressed air for suction. So it's literally sucking the part up. When the nozzle goes down to pick the part up, it goes to place it in the correct location on the board according to where the program has told it that part needs to be, and it just places it down with a certain amount of pressure against the board. Now, you may be asking, well, how does it know that it's put the part in the right place, or what happens if it picks up the part and the part for whatever reason falls off before it gets to the board? Well, there are a number of checks that take place when the machine is actually operating. So what will happen is that the nozzle will pick the part up and go over a camera. The camera will actually check to make sure that the part isn't overly rotated, because they don't come out perfectly symmetrical on each pickup. And if it's not perfect, it will actually rotate it. And this is the amazing thing. You can't even see this happen. It happens so quickly. It will rotate the part to make sure that it's aligned correctly, and then it will go and be placed on the board. And then there's also a camera that will check and make sure that the part actually did get down on the board. Now, I mentioned that the nozzle applies some pressure when it puts the part down against the board. And again, remember, the solder paste, one of the first things that it is responsible for doing is holding the part down. Now, why is that? Well, you can imagine that even if you had a conveyor system, or you had to pick the finished board up once the parts had been pasted or placed on it, and move it somewhere, they would all fall off. So you need that paste aspect, that stickiness of the solder paste, to hold the part down. Now, this is again an area where you can carefully now take the boards out of the machine once it's been populated with the parts, and put it on shelving to make sure that you have enough boards together and ready before running the next step. Or you can run them through the next step immediately. It doesn't matter. There is some handling time that's available. So that's part 2, one of the biggest parts and actually one of the most complicated and interesting parts of the process, the pick and place machine that's responsible for actually putting the surface mount parts on the board. I'd love to hear your comments of whether this is interesting, whether you find this fascinating, and I hope you're looking forward to the final part 3 on this process. Thank you.